People depend on e-commerce businesses, and many use ShipStation to manage their shipping. Last year, over 700 million shipping labels were printed by businesses using ShipStation. If you run a business that ships a lot of packages, save and get up to 90% off carrier rates with ShipStation. Go to shipstation.com/program to sign up for your free trial. No credit card required, and you can cancel anytime. That's shipstation.com/program.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget you can read my work on ESPN.com. I'm going to talk today about some off-season questions and topics facing the Commanders. Go into a little bit about that. It's going to be a long time to discuss all these topics, so just bear with me if we're not getting into everything right away, because got weeks and weeks and weeks to discuss here. So I'm going to talk about the draft upcoming, in a week or so, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there you go. So in a minute, I'll be talking about that. I want to start with a couple of things. One, Josh Harris will be talking to the media on Monday, late Monday morning, around 11:30 Eastern time. So the first chance to talk to him since the season ended, and just kind of get his thoughts on the season and then the offseason priorities. The priority this offseason is finding a stadium site. There you go. So anyway, so we'll talk to him and get answers on all sorts of topics. But again, the stadium remains the number one priority. And so there you go. And then also a couple other things, just some new bookkeeping purposes. David Blau will be staying in Washington. The Commanders blocked his ability to interview for 3 different jobs. This is how highly they think of him. So they blocked him from from talking to the Jets about a quarterback's coach job, same position with the Jaguars, and then the passing game coordinator with the Bears. Now, each one of those would be a promotion for Blau. He's an assistant quarterback's coach here. All of them would have represented promotions. But they can block if it's not for a coordinator's position, not pass game coordinator, but offensive or defense or special teams. If it's not for one of those jobs, you can block him. And obviously, they are very, very high on him. So here's the thing, like the succession plan that they have in place for if Kingsbury leaves involves the guys below him. And all those guys are the ones who are getting some of the attention this year. Tavita Pritchard interviewed for Jacksonville. Brian Johnson talked to Houston about their job. So as we talk right now, those jobs remain open. So we'll see what happens there. So I'm not sure that either Pritchard or Johnson are the favorites for those to land those jobs, but until those jobs are filled, we'll see what happens. But obviously, there's so much of this starts with Kingsbury and his decision to stay, which is what Washington wanted. It's really what I thought would happen all along this season, but you never know. But the succession plan that Dan Quinn has in place is, okay, if you lose Kingsbury in a year or two, well, you have other guys to bump up. Now, whether it's Pritchard, whether it's Blau, or Brian Johnson. Now, it wouldn't have been a shock to lose one of those guys just because they had such a good year. They have experience working with young quarterbacks, et cetera. But the good news for them is so far they haven't lost anybody, and this is a really, really good staff. Blau is very highly valued. Kingsbury's talked about how smart he is, one of the smartest players or quarterbacks he's been around, and now he's on the staff. He has a good rapport with Jaden Daniels. In an ideal situation, if Kingsbury, let's say, left after 2025, then you have Pritchard and or Blau to move up or Brian Johnson to move up, and each one of those guys then can get a promotion here, and that's how you maintain continuity. A worst case scenario would be is if some of those guys left now and then you lose Kingsbury in a year as well. So if the fact that they can keep that's why they were going to block Blau, because he's only 29 and they have, let's see what happens next year. And that's how he can move up here. And so anyways, there you go. That's some of the little nuggets to know right now. So let's get to some of the offseason questions that are absolutely staring the Commanders in the face, starting with, what do you do at defensive tackle? That, of course, means Allen and Payne. Let's start with the obvious one, I'm going to start with Daron Payne first, because some people, would say get rid of them both. Well, no, you can't. And here's why with Daron Payne. He would have, if you want, first of all, he's still a good defensive tackle. And they don't have a lot of those on this roster, right? I mean, John Allen can still play defensive tackle. His situation is a little bit different than Daron Payne's, though, and I'll explain why in a minute. With Johnny Newton, I like him. I don't know that he's ready to be what they need him to be as a defensive tackle, but clearly he can play. And then there you go. Like, Sheldon Day did a nice job as a backup, but he's going to be one of those guys where you're going to always see, can you upgrade? But I will say Dan Quinn considers him a glue guy, but they do need but he's a backup end of the rotation type guy at that position. So you do need to find, if you're going to do something here, you'd have to replace as well. But let's look at Daron Payne. If they wanted to move on from him, which I haven't heard anything like that, but they would only save $370,000. They'd have $25.8 million in dead cap space. So he has a $26.17 million cap hit. That, of course, is a lot, but I just don't see, move on from that one. It's, he's signed through 2026, and there you go. John Allen's a different story. This is where they're going to have to make a decision because he counts 22.4 million against the cap. That's a lot of money for him. He just turned 30. And so what will they do there? And that's something I don't know. Obviously, he's going into the last year of his deal. No more guaranteed money. Going to be the same case for Payne next year. He will not have guaranteed money in the last year of his deal either. If they wanted to move on from Allen, they save $16.47 million. And the question there is, to be honest, I think it'd be really hard for them to pay that much money for a defensive tackle unless you're still making impact plays and and becoming a Pro Bowl player, whatever it is. But we didn't see enough of that from Allen this year. So the question is, would they move on from him, or would they try to tack on another year or two and somehow lower the cap hit and spread out a little bit differently? Because that's what would make some sense if you wanted to keep him, because it's just really hard to pay him that much money and keep him at that 22.4 cap hit. The one thing too with the defensive tackles, like I think you're going to have to bolster that position somehow, regardless. But if you move on from Allen, and there are some guys in free agency that Washington may like because they were in Dallas with Dan Quinn. I'll get to that in a minute. But so that's the one thing to keep in mind there. Like you have to replace. So you're going to pay somebody big money, but can you get a lot more productivity out of somebody than what you're paying Allen, and maybe for a lot less, which gives you quality defensive tackle play or comparable defensive tackle play at a lower price, and then allows you to take that money and spend it elsewhere as well. So that's a big decision they have to make, and I don't know which way they're leaning. I know that at one point this year they're kind of looking at like, hey, if he plays well, you can always extend him. And so I've been going over a lot of this stuff in the postseason, haven't gotten through all the stuff. Again, the impact plays have not been there like consistently. And is that because coming back from the injury? I don't know. It's kind of comparable to Marshon Lattimore. He came off his injury and did not have the impact that they had hoped to, especially against guys like AJ Brown and Mike Evans. Anyways, so that's the one thing is on the defensive tackles. There you go. Anyway, next up is offensive line. What do you do there? Andrew Wiley's going to be a guy that people are going to talk about because he'll be going into the last year of his deal. He only has a $10.4 million cap hit, so it's a very affordable number for him. They would save 7.75 if they cut him. But then again, you have to replace. And, how are you going to do that? Could you wait until the draft to do so? It may be a better option to do that, but you can't wait for the draft for everything because you only get one first round pick. And, you can obviously find a guy in the second round too, start a position, but it just depends on what you do at other positions, how you assess that. And, if you signed another tackle, you have Ronnie Stanley from Baltimore as a free agent. I haven't looked into any of this stuff to know which guys they may even be looking at, but that's just that's a top offensive tackle out there. Could you then move Brandon Coleman over to the right side? You could do that if you draft a left tackle. So there's a lot of ways they can go, but that's the book on Wiley's that they would save almost $8 million if they cut him. But then again, you have to go out and replace. And how do you best do that? And I know with Sam Cosmi's injury, there's a little bit of a wrench into the whole situation. You're not going to go out and sign an expensive guard to take his place next year. But what you should do is, again, bolster that depth. And part of the way, so I think like that's something you have to watch for sure as well, because I think there's some interesting names in the draft. But I would also, again, if I'm them, I'm gonna keep building and building that line, because when you look at the Eagles, the team they need to pass, it's the trenches, man. The both sides of the ball have really really good line play, and that's what these guys need to get to. Now, there are other things they have too, and you can close that gap by getting an impact player on the outside or an impact player at running back, whatever it is, but really you've got to improve those lines. And to be honest, if you really want to catch up to them, you got to improve that defense, because that's where the big concerns lie.
This ain't the little itty bitty teeny tiny bowl. This is Super Bowl 59. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 59. Scoring touchdowns is key to hoisting the Vince Lombardi Trophy, and you have a shot to score big by betting on them at DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code KEIM. That's code KEIM, K-E-I-M, for new customers, and get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas, 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Another topic is, what will they do with Marshawn Lattimore? Now, you should know by now, like Adam Peters in his final press conference of the season did say, like, he referenced 2025 for Lattimore. So clearly they're going to bring him back. The big question with him is, what level of play will he be at, and what do they do to help themselves in the offseason in case he comes back and plays the way he did? Like, that's just not going to be good enough. You didn't give up that much, and you're not devoting that much cap space to a guy if you don't think he can cover an A.J. Brown consistently, cover guys like Mike Evans. That's why he's here. You needed a guy like that, and he did not show that he could do that this season. Now, what he does in the future, I don't know. Again, we don't know how much the injury or the effects of the injury impacted his game this offseason. So we'll have to wait and see. But if I'm them, I'm still absolutely looking for more corners to help in that, to help just for depth, because to be honest, even if Lattimore does play, can you trust that he's going to stay healthy? Because he hasn't shown in recent years that he's going to for long periods of time. So that's something you have to take into consideration as well. So I'm definitely going to try and bolster that if I'm them. And so that's the big thing there. Then the other one is extensions. Is Terry McLaurin is up for an extension. He's got 1 year left on his deal after this year. That's where you start to look in the spring after you get through the free agency period, and that's starting around the time just after the draft. That's when those things start to occur. So what do you do there? And clearly his importance to the organization is pretty high. His importance to Jayden Daniels is very high. And I don't think he's going to want to go anywhere. So it's really something that you can get done for sure. And then the other thing is, what do you do with some of these 1 year guys? Bobby Wagner, he made $6.5 million this year. I don't think it's going to cost much more to get him back this year. He wants to keep playing, and they could use a guy like him in the middle for sure. The other key for them is they do like Jordan McGee, and they also like Dominique Hampton at linebacker too. So I'll be curious to see how his development is for the summer. I kind of forget about him sometimes because he got switched from safety, but I think that's going to be key. It's not going to take, he would not be in a Bobby Wagner role, but it's more, can you help him? But then also Jordan McGee could be in that kind of role. But I don't know that he's ready for that yet. And I don't know that they think he's ready for that yet. So Wagner certainly has to be on the table. 6.5 last year. I can't imagine that it'd be any different this year. Zach Ertz was at 2.4 million last year. And I know he wants to come back. I know they would like him back. It's just a matter of, do you get it done? Can you come to the number that's right? I know how much he likes playing for Kingsbury. At one point, he told me he wanted to retire playing for Kingsbury. We'll see if that's still the case. I know he likes playing here. We all know that. And it was genuine, because it was what is exactly the same message you heard publicly is what you heard privately. It's just a matter of, do they get it done? This is, would probably be his last contract if it's a couple years, So, anyways, that's one thing to do. Jeremy Chin is also up 3.9 million, 3.925 million this past season. He was certainly did a nice job for them, and he improved, and he was a physical presence back there. So I could see him coming back too. But again, I don't think you're going to have to spend big for him either. So right now, here's the big thing. They have approximately between 77 and $80 million in cap space for this year. That's like third most in the NFL. They have 43 players under contract, but 12 of them were signed those futures deals, which means their contracts they signed a contract already, but they don't go into effect until the first day of the league year. So they are going to have to re-sign some guys, and those 12 guys are all minimum type deals, right? So they're not going to, they're all less than $1 million. Well, they are going to have to sign some guys to get up to that, to fill out that roster. And so I think some of that money that they have available, it's not like it's all 80 million on outside guys. It's 80 million, but you have to sign your guys too. I've given you ways that they can create more space, whether it's with Wiley, whether it's with Allen, if they wanted to do that, or maybe by extending, you could do something with some of these extensions and maybe lower a hit this year. We'll see. But so they do have a lot of guys to fill out, but they do have a lot of cap space available and with the ability to create more. So then the matter is, where do you spend the money? So that's the other big thing we're going to have to talk about as we go forward. There's some big name free agent receivers. T. Higgins is one of them. How much do you want to invest at that position? Or would you just say, hey, listen, you can always get one in the draft, or you can find a running back in the draft who's explosive that would help the offense. You need another dynamic player out there to pair with McLaurin and then obviously Jaden. But how much do you invest at receiver? Because Higgins is going to cost a lot. So would you want to go out and get him, or could you go with a lower guy who maybe has, maybe has a lot of what they want, which is speed, downfield speed, but maybe you don't have to invest the $30 million or so that it would take to get a guy like a T. Higgins. So that's the question you have to ask yourself. What are you willing to pay? Now, I will say, you can really help this offense by doing that. But let me ask you this too. If you can only spend at one position, which one is it, right? I don't know that you're going to be able to go crazy at multiple spots. Now, again, the way you can structure a deal, the first year hit is never as bad, right? It sometimes takes a couple years to get to the big numbers. So you always have to keep that in mind. So you can go out and get multiple guys, right? But if you sign a T. Higgins, what can you do on defense? And let's be honest, like you just said it's the defense that really needs to improve. I would want to keep building around Jaden Daniels, get as much offensive talent as you can. And there are some guys in the draft that are going to be interesting that I think you can help yourself with. But that defense needs to improve. So if you spend on a T. Higgins, can you then go out and get a defensive tackle and maybe a defensive end, a guy like Josh Sweat from Philly? Josh Sweat, he can rush the passer a little bit, and he can set the edge. But it's funny because I was talking to another defensive coach whose point he made a point was the one thing you don't know with Sweat is how much of it was at him, how much of it was the talent that he's playing with along that defensive front. So that's something to weigh as well. But they do need some help at that spot at defensive end. And then guys like Dante Fowler, he's another one I forgot to bring up because he's going to be on that free agent market. A good year with sacks, but he's really as much of a situational guy as anything else. And so that's how much you're going to invest in him. Would you invest more in him to another 1-year deal, or is this his chance to go out and get a bigger deal because he's been hurt a few times and hasn't had this kind of a season in a while? So I think he feels pretty good about that aspect. I think he'd like to probably go out and try and cash in a little bit. So don't blame him. Could be his last shot at that kind of a deal. But I do think you have to decide, where do you want to spend the money and how do you want to allocate it? I do think they'll go out and, I'm very big on saying it's fit, not names, but I think there are some good names out there who could be a good fit as well. So those guys are fine to go chase, but you just don't chase the name to chase the name. And just always remember that the fit was an important factor in this whole roster last year. And the same people are going to try to build the 2025 roster with the same philosophy they used last year. But that is going to be the big key. And I would look for defensive line help. And then I'm going to try and find another corner, whether it's lower, in the free agency, the draft, whatever. I would want to really bolster that. And then I would keep adding on the offensive line, and then find a way to get another impact player. Now, that's a big list there. I get it. You're not going to be able to get everything the way you want. But I do think, like in the draft, for example, there are multiple players at running back, for example, who could fit what they want or what they need. And a guy I'm very high on because of this hat, I know Travion Henderson is a guy that I've watched a lot. I know there's other good running backs for sure that could be, the guy from North Carolina, Genty from Boise State. I doubt he'd be there at 29, but you will have some choices at 29 if you wanted to go that route. Would you want to go running back at 29? Let me know in the YouTube comments if you want to do that. But I think it's something you could consider. Look at the impact Jahmyr Gibbs made for Detroit. And, obviously Barkley made an impact, but at 29, you could go that route if you wanted to, if you decide that's what you want to do. But those guys there are some guys that have some big time ability who will be available there. Is that what you want? Could you do that? And plus maybe a lower end free agent at receiver, but who fits what they want. Somebody with speed. Darius Slayton's a guy with speed. Is that a guy you would want? Then you could go do that, draft a running back, bolster that line. Now this offense can really rock consistently and in different ways, as well, as opposed to this year kind of being reliant on the pass game mostly, and then the run game with Jaden Daniels. But I would really, really try, if you're going to invest the money, would you rather do it as much on defense? How would you want to allocate it? So I think that's the big thing they're going to have to decide as well, because let's face it, man, that's where they have to improve and become a lot more consistent, and stopping the run and then being more consistent running the ball. I think with your backs will be a big thing this offseason. Again, bolster those lines to make it to get you up to par with the Eagles. And I don't think they're that far away. The Eagles the Eagles defense last year at this time was bad. And look at what they did in one offseason. Now, they also had some young building blocks, with Carter and Davis and all that up front, but they really strengthened themselves in the back seven last offseason. So I don't see any reason why this defense can't take a big jump with a good offseason for sure. So anyways, folks, there you go. That's it for me. I'll be back on Tuesday. I'm going to have Sam Fortier from the Washington Post on. Going to have some more guests on later this week, and then get you start turning to the draft a little bit in about a week from now or so with ESPN's Jordan Reed. So anyways, that's it for now. Appreciate you tuning in. I'll talk to you next time.